Hello, well I'm back with a further update from my 4th of June video over the Freedom of Information requests I presented to the Department of Home Affairs, the Cabinet Office and the Department of Health and Social Care, submitted on the 4th of May 2023. In a sense, this is now not just about Dr Ranson, about the trust though we have in our government at its most senior levels and also maintaining the freedom of the press here on the island. Just to recap, each department was sent an FOI in identical terms to establish facts in my investigation. The question that now seems needed to be asked is, did the 5 gatekeeper civil servants conspire together to tone down the clinical advice from the Isle of Man medical director between the 13th and the 16th of March 2020? This was at the onset of the pandemic, and question was, in their presentation to the emergency Comin on the 16th of March, was it full and frank and on the clinical advice? We know the 5 gatekeepers' names are Will Greenhow, Caldrick Randall, Mark Lewin, Catherine Magson and Dan Davis. Dr Ranson's professional advice warned of the devastating impact the looming COVID pandemic would have on our ill-prepared health service and recommended emergency measures, including the immediate border closures. It seems that message got lost in transmission through the gatekeepers. And because Comin did not act decisively to close borders for a further 10 days, instead Comin followed the English delay strategy contrary to the Manx medical advice. And it's widely acknowledged that unnecessary lives were therefore lost here on the island. Is it a coincidence that this time period marked the beginning of the vilification, the bullying of Dr Ranson by certain Isle of Man government officials? Or was her gross misconduct a deliberate attempt to bury something far more sinister which happened in government at the beginning of the COVID crisis? The FOI was carefully prepared with legal assistance to get information about important events between the 13th and 16th of March 2020. So turning now to responses on those FOIs, as of the 4th of June 2023, Cabinet Office and DHSC had simply acknowledged but failed to respond within 20 working days. The only substantive response has been from the Department of Home Affairs. DHA said it does not hold information I'm referring to. Amazingly, DHA added, to provide you with advice and assistance, we do hold email correspondence between Dan Davis and Rosalind Ranson from the 13th of March 2020, which relates to Dan Davis' request for the presentation. And a subsequent forwarding email to Will Greenhow contained the supplied presentation. Please confirm how you wish to proceed with this request. So we now know Dr Ranson's presentation dated Friday the 13th of March exists. Dan Davis received it and shared it with Will Greenhow. But DHA thinks the press and the public should not be allowed to see Dr Ranson's clinical advice. DHA answered the FOI request to produce all communications between the gatekeeper civil servants between the 13th and 16th of March as follows. DHA does not hold the information you're referring to and will likely need to apply a practical refusal reason to this request under section 11.3a of the Act. To provide you with advice and assistance, DHA do hold an email from the 16th of March 2020 which contains reference to versions of the presentation supplied to Dan Davis. Please confirm how you wish to proceed with this request. So now we know that versions of Dr Ranson's presentation supplied to Dan Davis was emailed by DHA on the 16th of March, but we're not told who sent it or to whom. As there are versions, we know someone in DHA did change Dr Ranson's clinical advice. However, DHA don't want to share with me how extensively Dr Ranson's clinical advice was changed or who has shown the changed advice. At the same time, there were no recorded communications between the gatekeepers. I went back to DHA to say it was ludicrous to suggest there was 0 records of communications over that weekend. The Manx public are never going to believe that the island's most senior civil servants collectively went home at 5 o'clock on Friday and did nothing until Monday, days after WHO had declared a worldwide pandemic and after receipt of dire clinical advice warning from the medical director. This week, DHA replied, in the meantime, the department has conducted further review of your requests and are now considering whether disclosure of the information requested will trigger a qualified exemption which may prevent us from providing the information to you. So we have now gone from the DHA does not hold any records to it miraculously finding records for which DHA is now considering qualified exemption without specifying which applies. I have told DHA this is unacceptable, that they should publish what is held or explain why it must be kept a secret. At the time of recording, except for acknowledgement from both Cabinet Office and DHSC, they have not supplied any more information. Stony silence, not even a confirmation that Will Greenhow was forwarded a copy of Dr Ranson's clinical advice by Dan Davis. So they refuse to tell us if they have records, let alone whether they're prepared to release them to the public. I've now referred all three departments to the Information Commissioner to rule upon these FOIs, both individually and collectively. After all, I appear to be facing a carefully coordinated wall of silence, with DHA being used as an outlier to see whether it can deflect the FOI. The law requires each government department to process FOIs independently in their own silos. There is no legitimate reason for both DHSC and Cabinet Office to adopt the same strategy of ignoring the FOI. Now, to many, the whole thing just doesn't add up. Then I learned the Information Commissioner published an outcome and remand reference in INV 2023-52 on the 28th of June 2023 against the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office was reprimanded for allowing illegal access by one of its officers to the FOI database in all other government departments. It's illegal snooping on FOIs handled across the entire government. Full facts were not released into the reprimand, so we don't know if it was just curiosity by a rogue individual or a sinister plan to coordinate and massage the release of information to the public. I asked the Cabinet Office to tell me which of my FOIs had been illegally accessed by them, to whom and where the information had been passed. The Cabinet Office blankly refused and instead insisted I write to every government department individually to check. This is not transparency in action. As an independent journalist, I have for a sustained period now been obstructed by the DHSC and the Cabinet Office, to name just a few, on the Ranson case related FOI. All Manx residents have a legal right to information under the Freedom of Information Act. Throughout this case, my FOIs have been subject to slow processing, claims of legal privilege, and often forced to go to review. When information is finally disclosed, it's blatantly selective and incomplete. Examples: remember the terms of reference for Expol, the report into the concocted documents, the continuing fog around whether the Chief Minister actually ordered the second Ranson High Court appeal, and DHSC's refusal to publish the minutes to its decision not to proceed with a second appeal. However, when it suits government's narrative, it keenly releases FOI information, just like the Expol report into the concocted documents. These were prematurely released whilst the tribunal was still considering it as evidence. The Manx taxpayers now stumping up 1.4 million to Kate Brenner KC for the COVID review, and an unspecified six-figure sum to Richard Wright KC for the Ranson case handling review. Crucially, neither of these KCs have been given legal powers to compel the production of evidence or appearance of witnesses. Participation is entirely voluntary. In fact, I'm giving evidence next week on a voluntary basis, of course, and I want it to be heard and be put in the public domain. So how can the Manx public have confidence in either Brunner or Wright finding out the facts if they are wholly reliant upon the Isle of Man government, including DHSC and the Attorney General, choosing to fully cooperate? The tribunal heard all the evidence and arguments at trial and found that they had failed to conduct standard disclosure and awarded punitive damages against them. It was their gross misconduct defending the Ranson case which prompted the need for the Wright review in the first place. Who has confidence that the same individuals will suddenly change and now honestly volunteer full and frank disclosure to the Brunner or Wright reviews? Last month, DHSC advocates went to the tribunal and obtained an order to release the Ranson trial bundle to the Clerk of Tynwald for the Wright review. They argued that DHSC wants transparency and openness. Is this the same transparency and openness standard to which DHSC was simply ignoring my FOIs? My sources so far have been on the money, and they tell me the requested information should be within those trial bundles. So if so, get them out there. Let's get them into the open. The more we have these double standards at the top of the Manx government, the greater the public distrust, surely. This destroys the morale of the thousands of honest and hard-working civil servants who feel tarred by association with the gatekeepers. And let me be clear, it's the action of the gatekeepers in March 2020 which is the story, and the sooner we get this out, the better it'll be. The public statements of contrition by the Chief Minister in Tynwald in May 2020 and 23, professing transparency, now grates when nothing has changed in over a year. This is persistent, selective and inconsistent disclosures made by government in response to FOI requests. This is neither transparency nor good governance. Ranson is not an isolated case because since this has all happened, I've been inundated with other people telling me about other stories. And it's vital that the press plays its part in maintaining checks and balances in our society. And that means government must play its part by at least abiding by the rules. So please, can they start now by answering my FOIs honestly so this report can go into the public domain and we can all move on? Thank you for watching this. Thank you for subscribing and helping to keep this in front of the most important people, you and me. And of course, this is not playing out just the Isle of Man, which I don't like. I don't think anyone wants this to be seen, what is going on around the world where people are watching this and the BMA and all those people are getting involved. Please, let's move on. Let's close this case and let the gatekeepers release the information.